In 1988, in the farm country west of Paducah, Kentucky, a family turned on their kitchen tap and drank the water. It carried technetium-99, a radioactive metal that does not exist in nature. It exists in only one place, inside the guts of a nuclear reactor. It had come from the plant up the road, and it was the least of what that plant had been hiding. This is the dark history of Western Kentucky, the plant that breathed plutonium. In 1952, in one of the poorest corners of Kentucky, the government raised a machine the size of a stadium. The Paducah Gaseous Diffusion Plant, 750 acres on the Ohio River, was built to enrich uranium, first for the bombs of the Cold War, later for the nation's power plants. It drew a fiercely loyal workforce, more than 1,800 men and women, into hot, cavernous buildings, turning trainloads of dusty uranium powder into the material of the arms race. They were told it was safe, riskless. In the beginning, uranium ore was scarce, so the government tried an experiment. It would recycle. Used fuel from the reactors that made plutonium for bombs would be shipped to Paducah and run through again. From 1953 to 1976, more than 100,000 tons of it arrived, in freight cars as a fine black powder. What the workers were not told is what rode in with it. Fission byproducts, technetium-99, and two heavy metals the plant was never designed to handle, neptunium and plutonium. Plutonium is a core ingredient of a nuclear bomb. It is roughly 100,000 times more radioactive, gram for gram, than the uranium those men thought they were breathing. By a contractor's own estimate, 12 ounces of it came in with that black powder. 12 ounces that delivered more than twice as much radiation into the environment as the 61,000 pounds of uranium the plant poured into the Ohio River over 35 years. The plant's officials, a 1999 Washington Post investigation found, had known about the plutonium since the 1950s. It was written down and filed in archives the public rarely opened. The men in those buildings knew none of it. Respiratory protection was optional, old Army gas masks that fit poorly and were seldom used. The dust was everywhere. At lunch, they brushed the black and green powder off their food. "They told us you could eat this stuff and it wouldn't hurt you," one retired shop steward remembered. And to prove it, he said, some supervisors salted their own bread with green uranium dust. The men carried it home on their skin. "We frequently discovered that our bed linens would be green or black in the morning," one 31-year veteran said, "from dust that apparently absorbed into our skin." One of those men was Joe Harding. He came to the plant the year it opened, 1952, for what he called important, patriotic, secret work. The training, he wrote, began with a warning: never mention radiation. The public is stupid about radiation. He mixed powdered uranium by hand, in air he could see. "I spent all those years breathing uranium hexafluoride gas so thick and heavy that you could see the haze in the air," he wrote. "You could taste it coated on your teeth and in your throat and lungs. Powder on the floor was thick enough that you would leave tracks." When he asked whether it was dangerous, he was told he'd get less radiation than from a glow-in-the-dark wristwatch. Within a year, his body began to fail. Lesions crept up his legs. His weight fell from 175 pounds to 125. He vomited so often the other men called him Joe Earp. Calcium growths pushed out of his knuckles. He lost most of his stomach to cancer. And still he kept count, writing down more than 50 cancers among the 200 men who had started alongside him. "Everything was so safe, so riskless," he said near the end. "Today we know the truth about those promises. I can feel it in my body." Joe Harding spent his last 9 years fighting the government he had served. He asked the Energy Department to investigate. After 18 months, it delivered its verdict. His cancers were most likely caused by smoking, and by the fact that he frequently ate country ham. They cut off his disability pension and his medical insurance. He died in 1980, at 58, nearly penniless. "It is absolutely futile," he wrote near the end, "like fighting a tiger with a toothpick." After they buried him, his body was exhumed for testing. They found uranium in his bones. His widow, Clara, sold the house, fought on for years, and finally settled for $12,000. She remembered the first hearing, her and her lawyer on one side of the room. On the other, 14 attorneys and experts from the plant and the government. "There were 14 of them and only 2 of us," she said. So that was pretty much that. 20 years later, the same government that had brushed him aside would call Joe Harding a hero of the Cold War. For years it stayed inside the fence. Then it didn't. In 1988, a county health inspector tested a farmer's well and found the plant's fingerprints in the drinking water. Underground, 2 great plumes of contamination had formed and were moving, roughly a foot a day, toward the Ohio River. 10 billion gallons of groundwater tainted. The government began quietly connecting neighbors to city water, one house at a time. In August 1999, the Washington Post put it on the front page, and the country finally looked. The Department of Energy sent its own Office of Oversight to Paducah, and its own investigators confirmed that the plant had improperly disposed of radioactive and hazardous material, on-site and off. Congress held hearings. The Energy Secretary said the nation's security goals had sent many of our workers into harm's way, and that the government had to right the wrongs of the past. And yet, the department also held its ground. Worker exposure, it said, had been minimal. Its monitoring showed no accumulation that would threaten health. No workers, it insisted, are at risk today. The reckoning came in documents and dollars. The EPA had already placed Paducah on the Superfund list in 1994. A whistleblower lawsuit ground forward for years. In 2016, Lockheed Martin agreed to pay the government $5 million to settle allegations under the False Claims Act. And the cleanup, the plumes, the mountain of crushed uranium barrels, the 38,000 cylinders of waste, is now projected to run past the year 2070 at a cost north of $13 billion. The bomb was cheap. The burial is not. The plant stopped enriching uranium in 2013. For a while it simply went dark, a stadium-sized machine, cooling. And then, in 2025, the government leased the ground again to make enriched uranium once more. The same question hangs over the fence line that hung over Joe Harding. Who pays for the atom? At Paducah, for half a century, the answer was the men who were told it was safe, and the families downstream who drank the water and were never told at all.